tour that I'm doing, and so I decided I'd try to play some music while I'm speaking. Right. Anyhow. Hello. As I've been speaking with Richard, I wanted to present to everyone a good picture of what it is we want to lay out in terms of this tour. One of the things is very important is this is something that happened in not too far off Los Angeles history. This event that we're focusing on is the capture of Richard Ramirez, and we're also encompassing bits of his crime spree from 84, 85. How many people here in this room have any level of connection to the Ramirez case and would like to just show me? At what level are we talking about? Are we talking about personal experience or anything beyond?
I knew Maria Hernandez.
You did?
I was working with her. She sat across from me. On the Friday night that she got shot, she called in the office to say she wouldn't be in because she had been robbed, is what they told us. But I knew Maria.
You knew her?
I worked with her at Papermark.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. I was asking regarding, sorry Ken, we're going to go mobile.
That's okay.
I was asking if someone had any pertinent experience regarding the Night Stalker case, and this gentleman, do you mind repeating on my...
I used to work with Maria Hernandez.
Too far away.
Too far away.
Too far away.
Kind of put it right at you.
I should talk really loud.
Okay,
I used to work with Maria Hernandez, who was the roommate of the fourth victim, Dale Okazani. She was roommates with her, and Maria and I had become very good friends. She used to work in the same accounting department, and our desks faced each other, and she sat across from me. And what happened to them was on a Friday night.
Yes.
And Saturday morning, when she came into work, she had called in, or actually her boyfriend's name was, I can't remember her boyfriend's name at the time, Howard. Howard called in to say Maria was shot in the hand, and I interpreted it as her getting an injection in the hand.
Right.
And it was a week later that she didn't come in that we realized that she was involved in some type of high-profile crime. We put two and two together and just assumed because her roommate was murdered.
Right.
When Maria came back to work several months later, she learned how to do everything left-handed because we worked in accounting and she used to 10-key, and she learned how to do everything with her left hand. And we were told not to ask her anything about the case. Well, 3 hours into the workday, I couldn't help it, and I asked her.
You had to ask?
I had to. And it was very good for her. It was cathartic. She was able to speak about it, and she cried, and she really let loose, and she sat there and told me all the chilling facts about it. It was very unnerving.
I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second just to give the people here. Can everyone hear what the man was talking about just now? I'm sorry, your name, sir?
Louis,
what Louis was talking about. I was talking about the Maria Hernandez case, and I'll just give you a little brief background on that. She's one of the few survivors of Richard Ramirez's attacks. What happened in a nutshell was that, can everyone hear me?
Yeah, let's just get you close up to the mic.
Because it wasn't working.
Testing, you were just a little too far away.
Oh. What happened with Maria Hernandez was that she had pulled up.
Maybe your iPad is just interfering with it. Yeah.
You're right. I was playing some Black Sabbath, and obviously it had an ill effect on the electronics. There is energy in the room.
Yeah, just move away. That's good.
The same.
We're learning a lot.
Anyway, Maria Hernandez was one of the few survivors of one of the Night Stalker attacks. She, in fact, was shot by him in the carport as she arrived home from work. What she did, though, what saved her life, was that she raised her hand in defense as he came at her with a gun and fired at her. The bullet then striking the keys that were in her hand, her car keys and her house keys, and deflecting the bullet, saving her life but injuring her on the hand nevertheless. At that point, she fell to the ground and played dead. Ramirez then proceeded to enter her apartment, where she was roommate with her roommate became a victim of Ramirez. She remained there until he left. He did spot her as he was leaving, noticed that she was alive, attempted to finish her off, but it wasn't successful. And so therefore she became a survivor. And that's the lady that that Louis here has been describing to us. Thank you so much. It's wonderful. Anybody else have something? The reason I'm asking is because part of the motivation for this whole project is the personal connection that many of us had here.
It's not good, Richard. It's a mess.
Okay, we're just going to cut the microphone and you're just going to enunciate. Sorry.
Okay.
Just
Can
talk
everyone
about
hear me?
Yeah.
All right.
it. Coming closer, please.
Just fine.
All right. Yeah, see, one of the motivations that I have in this is based on the profound effect that living through this era, through this episode in LA history had on me personally, and it remains with me. And I know that everyone I've ever spoken to, when I began researching this and putting together, the pieces of a tour like this, was everyone had something to say. Everyone told me a story or an episode of what they were doing that summer. Today, we have this hot weather outside the sun. It's all appropriate because that weekend when he was caught was the hottest day in 100 years of LA history. It was like 102 degrees at 8 in the morning. And a lot of us remember that, and perhaps I'm sure a lot of you as well. And so it's the personal experience and the narratives that is sort of a common voice around the city that anyone you can talk to, because all of us were affected. Nobody knew where the guy was going to strike next. It was literally sometimes down the street from you or across town, but the uncertainty and the unpredictability of his acts was something that gripped the city in a way that many of us, it was unique. We'll never forget that. Besides Mr. Louis here, does anybody have something else to add that perhaps had been touched by this case? No? Okay, well, I can tell you that as far as our family was concerned in our area, I grew up in East Los Angeles. And he did, in fact, strike very nearby, within a mile of us. We have, in our house, my parents put up those steel bars on the windows that maybe you've seen on different houses around town. Those were all put in the neighborhood because of Richard Ramirez. It was him, he had this really profound effect on the sense of security of everybody in the city, and it was something that if you were there, you'll never forget. So anyhow, what I put together today, this is the second year that we've done this, is that I've sort of constructed a tour that's going to take people who are interested, people who are inspired or shocked or are very curious about this, to come and see the deepest, darkest corners, the most grotesque of details, everything that...
Try this. Just try talking to that.
Hello. We plan to visit places that still bear the footsteps of Richard Ramirez. Places, ironically, being here in downtown LA, we are very, very close to, if there's anything akin to a dark spirit or a shadow or an energy emanating from someone like that's still around to this day, we'll definitely be right in the middle of it. It's something that thankfully a lot of locations and a lot of the geography still remains intact, that we can see and still relate and still imagine what it was like where he was hanging out, where he lived. It wasn't until after that he was captured that we then started getting details about how the guy operated, where he came from, why he came here, where he lived, how he survived, and what his motive. And then it was then that we discovered, oh wow, he lived here downtown LA. He needed to be in this area. He was a transient. He was kind of a low-life kind of guy that hung out just like people you might think you see, you never know. It was closer than we imagined in many levels, and it was something that I found to be profoundly interesting, and which is why I then proceeded at that time to formulate this tour, to be able to give people who are interested just a really great insight into it. We are going to be taking a path.
Okay, he's definitely haunting this place, and he's not even dead.
Can everybody sense what's going on here? There is something. I don't know how many of you guys are attuned to energies and to things of that nature. I can tell you that after my first tour, there was very, very strong I am not by nature a superstitious person. People who know me can attest to that. I am pretty pragmatic about life, about things, life and death, and crime. But things like this have always made me just wonder just a little bit. And prior to this tour, I did something unique that I didn't do before, which I went to see what's called a bruja, which is in Hispanic culture, it's a witch. It's a lady who deals in spiritual cleansing and knowledgeable on dark and white sides of things. I went to see her. She gave me some artifacts which people who are on the tour today will be carrying with them today. Just for the hell of it, I have them with us. She advised me that it's not so much to protect you once you go into areas that have this kind of energy, but it's more to protect you from bringing anything back. And I thought that was very significant, and I was grateful that I was able to meet her with that. And it makes me feel a little better because, believe it or not, little things happen to me after the last, and just perceptions that make you want to believe on things, that there is something else beyond the reality and the dimension that we live in. It's something, we're going to have some fun today. It'll be interesting, it'll be historic, it'll be a perspective on crime and this individual. But then again, there's other levels that I want to kind of respect. And in terms of respect, I also want to say that we will be meeting people today on the tour, seeing things, a very sensory tour. Our approach is to respect everywhere we go and respect everything we see. We're not out to sort of make a party out of it, but we're not out as a funeral procession either. We're out as people who are interested, people who want to learn, people who have experienced something, and who want to see a new angle on a well-known and very notorious story in LA crime history. At this point, does anyone else have any comments or questions? Yes?
Can I come up and tell a story?
Yeah, sure. Have your name, please.
Louis.
Louis. Another Louis.
There's two of us. Should I speak into this?
Yeah.
Sure, I think so. You hold that like that. This is Louis, ladies and gentlemen. Louis.
All right, so my story it's not as gruesome as the previous one.
Would you tell us your name again?
Oh, my name is Louis. Part 2. So when my grandmother, she lives in Montebello, and she has since the 1970s, and that's very close to Los Angeles and East LA and Monterey Park and Whittier, So there was a night, summer '85, and where she heard something. She was asleep and she was awoken by a loud noise, and everyone kind of had that fear instilled in them, and there's nothing you could do about it. I mean, the way she described it was like the most terrifying thing ever, And she's super religious and stuff, so she was doing her prayers and whatnot, and thankfully for her, it turned out being my drunk aunt climbing through the window because she had lost her keys, But yeah, my grandma got really freaked out and called the police, and it was a memorable incident for her because I'm sure she probably wouldn't have been as freaked if not for someone like Richard, freaking out the whole city. So, like I said, my story is not as gruesome, thankfully, but I guess it's an example of how Richard had an effect on the town.
Exactly. Everyone was on edge.
Yeah, most definitely.
You said on purpose
Thank you.
that you kind of look like
Thank you, Louis.
Thank you. Any comments
My
on?
whole life, I've been, my whole
You're much
teenage
better
life, since I've had
looking,
long hair, I've been told I look like Richard Ramirez. And it's kind of
good, yeah.
I didn't try to do it, just, it just
happened.
the way it worked out.
Were you ever in El Paso in the late 50s?
No, most certainly not.
Okay.
He does. He looks like it. It's better than
Thank you. Yeah. One of the details that stands out regarding that summer is that it was very hot, even at night. It was very hot. We all had to sleep with the windows shut closed.
Yeah.
We could not have the ventilation because of the sense of insecurity. So just imagine a sweltering hot night, and imagine having to sleep with your windows closed. Nothing to do about it because the fear of a vicious attack was greater than their discomfort, and it was a long, hot summer. So that added to the impression that it made on all of us. Anyone else like to share? Yes, sir.
What happened to Ramirez? Is he in jail now?
Ramirez lives and is in jail in San Quentin. He's serving consecutive life sentences for his conviction on multiple murder counts. He was married in the late 80s to a woman who was his, I guess she was in love with him, and he had a lot of female fans at the time of his trial and after his capture, groupies and such. But he is married. He has I have a copy of it. There's some sort of online dating service that he registered for, and his profile is out there, and he still seeks friendship and companionship. People, no one can really, you can visit him, it's a big hassle. I got a lot of information regarding him firsthand from the late author, Mr. Philip Carlo, who wrote the book Night Stalker, Life and Crimes of Richard Ramirez. He died earlier this year, but through extensive conversations and research that I did with him personally, I was able to acquire all this inside stuff about him. I asked a lot of things, and it helped me sort of put together the tour as well. I have pertinent stuff that was never revealed in the press at the time of his crime or thereafter. And so it'll be very interesting. If anybody has any questions at the time while we're walking or anything like that, please feel free to ask me, because there's so much information that I cannot put it into a presentation format at the moment when I'm speaking. So, yes, Richard.
Al, I'm wondering at what point while you sort of put this tour together in your head, or even while you were walking at it, did you realize we're not writing a crime tour, we're writing a social history tour? And at what point did you really start to realize that this was a way for this community, this Chicano community at the border of the county and city of Los Angeles really was going to find a way to talk about what had happened to it as a community during these events?
Well, there was a very interesting social reaction in terms of the community, the Hispanic community. As we all recognize, Richard Ramirez himself is Mexican American. He was born in El Paso, Texas, and moved to Los Angeles and San Francisco, and then eventually settled here in the early 80s. But the connection to the Mexican American community is that for decades we've had sort of a bad PR in terms of the overall image that we have, the city and the country. You know, it's a typical thing. I think historically we all know this, that it's sort of a ghetto-ish community in that sense. But what happened was when he was identified, when witnesses during his crime said, well, it was a Hispanic male, we're looking for an Hispanic male, there was a collective sense of dismay. I got to tell you, I know I speak for myself and everybody I knew in my community and my family, and then anybody else here that's connection to you, Louis, over there in East LA, you ask your parents, they'll know. We all felt like, oh man, you know, not another Mexican, you know, on a wanted poster. You know, it was a bummer. It was a dismay because, you know, there's been an uphill struggle to kind of get a good reputation and kind of show that we respect the law, that it's not a lawless wilderness out there on the east side. You know, there's decent working folks, but these kind of things inevitably will cause a backlash. And it's not just us, but it happens to many ethnicities and many groups and cultures and communities. The thing that was very significant was when he was caught. There was an overwhelming sense of pride because of the fact that he was caught by the Mexican American community. And I remember one of his quotes was, "Damn, my own people turned me in." I got that quote from Sheriff Guerrero, who interviewed him right after his arrest and told me all the things that was going on with him. But yeah, we felt that we were able to show that a grassroots group of people could come out on the street and show this bravery. And I mean, this is one of the most vicious killers in the history of recent memory. And when you find out, and when I tell you the details of how these people came out, and just barehandedly, if there was someone like him standing here, and he said, "You better stay away from me because I have a gun," and someone here just decides to say, "Yeah, I don't care. I'm going to go take you down." That kind of bravery is to me just something spectacular, something very special. And the sense of pride that happened afterwards is something that perhaps only that community can describe to you or sense. I don't think anyone else was not there can relate to it, because there was a sense of vindication. It was a sense of being able to communicate the fact that we are law-abiding, we do respect the law, we hated this guy as much as everyone else did. You know, that we were repelled by the nature of his crimes and his viciousness. He is not one of us. He is a criminal who needed to be stopped. And that was the message that came out through all that. And it was very important. And these people that we will visit, hopefully, if they choose to come out and talk to us, will tell you that exact same thing. That's how they felt. And that's how a lot of us felt by proxy. We all felt as a community, we did it, we got him, you know. And it was also stated in the headlines, hey, he came to the wrong neighborhood. He came to the wrong place. And who knows what would have happened if he had not been caught. You know, there's all these factors come into play. So as far as the social standpoint, yes, very important, very significant. And I hope to go over that a little bit more in relevance as we're watching and walking through these places, so you guys can sense the feeling of what I'm talking about. I love this, that people just will share things. If anybody else has something spontaneously to share, just let me know, raise your hands. We plan on taking this tour around maybe a 4-block radius just east of here, downtown Los Angeles. I'm going to show you the places that he called his home and the reasons why, and how he operated and how he survived. You'll understand him in a nutshell. He's a very simple kind of a guy. In terms of the city, you could say that he was a predator among prey. All of us was his prey for whenever he chose to strike. But he lived as a predator. He lived as someone surviving from someone else's property or the pleasures of taking someone else's life or attacking with violence. And just simply a parasite, you know, simply somebody that, an anomaly who didn't fit in, but through his violence until he was caught, unfortunately existed among us. We have his legacy to remember, and you know, this is a tour like this is something I think we should all once in a while open our eyes to and see things about a city, positive and negative. I think a city is defined not only by what it accomplishes and its greatness, but also by its crimes and by its dark side. And I think Ramirez is definitely a slice of history, and it's a story worth telling over and over. Yes, sir?
Al, I'm wondering, and I know you'll talk about this on the tour, but maybe just give us a little teaser. I know Richard Ramirez claimed to be satanic, but really did he's a sociopath. I mean, how much of it was just he's a sociopath, and how much of it was he truly followed this path, a satanic path?
Well, when you define a sociopathic personality, that is always someone who would be more vulnerable to something as Satanism or some subculture-ish kind of a trend. He started off as someone who liked to burglarize and steal and rob, and kind of a no good kind of a guy where he was a high school dropout. He wore out his welcome in El Paso growing up until he was a teenager. But everyone got fed up with him. He had
to be bad to get banned from El Paso.
Yeah, you got to be pretty bad to get banned.
El Paso is a very tough town.
It's
yeah,
tough.
That's taking mildly.
It's tough, but it was small, and pretty soon, you just run out of options as far as who you're going to rob. Because pretty soon everybody recognizes you, and he was obviously not someone that blended in very well. He's singular looking. Another interesting case here, and I'm going to give you a detail here that's better here than on the street. When he was about 12 to 13 years old, at this time he would ditch school very often. He pretty much liked to hang out. He would hang out with his cousin Mike. Now, his uncle Mike. Mike was a guy who was a veteran of Vietnam and who was trained in special forces. And his job, Mike's job, was to go out and assassinate and kill certain individuals of the enemy. for purposes of tactics and guerrilla warfare and stuff. And so he was trained specifically in that. And he would sit with Richard, and Richard would love hearing the stories. Richard would love to sit and this guy would just love to tell him. And he'd give him the details. Pretty soon his Uncle Mike went and got the shoebox out from the closet and brought out all the Polaroids. All the Polaroids of the things he did to the enemy, the grotesque disfigurement and dismemberment that he did of the enemy. I mean, just things like wearing body parts of your victims on. And this is something that happened. There was this kind of a psychosis in the military that would happen here and there. I'm sure maybe some of you have heard about that kind of a thing. Richard took to it very readily, very eagerly, extremely interested in that. He wanted to know more. Just tell me more. Show me these pictures. Tell me the details. The rapes, the assaults, the murder. I mean, and this is all, these guys took Polaroids for fun and kept them all. So Richard's there, all the time, absorbing this. His uncle also taught him some of the ways of stealth, which is essentially how to operate so that people don't know you're coming when you're doing. His uncle was very eager to share his talents with Richard, tell him how bad he was. So he taught him essentially how to creep, how to crawl into someone's home, how to use the night and the shadows. As the late author Phil Carlo said to me, he taught him this ballet with the shadows, how to dance with it as things move in darkness, how to move among it so that you're not perceived and seen. I remember details like he told Richard that your two biggest enemies are gravel and dry leaves on the ground. And don't avoid them, and don't step on them. People will hear you coming. So Richard loved that, and he actually used a lot of those techniques in his career, in his capers involving burglary. He was a proficient burglar, really good. He can come in and out anywhere. And that's what he did for a long period of time. It wasn't until he spent some time here, when he got to Los Angeles, spent some time in county jail. I cannot tell you precisely what the catalyst was that propelled him into Satanism, but apparently there was someone in there who turned him on to it, and from there he took it with a vengeance. He really got into it. After that point, he began to get this kind of other dimension inspiration from what he thought was Satan having taken him under his wing and giving him directions of what he should do to create crime and mayhem and just a very destructive nature and to commit his horrible crimes. So yeah, that was an aspect of how he got that way. There's a lot of theories. I mean, El Paso is about 120 miles from Alamo Basin in New Mexico. There's another theory that at that time all the kids born there had a radioactive contamination who were being born. There's a lot of documented cases of that. There's a... Yeah.
His older brother, right?
His older brother, Robert?
Yeah. 15 operations.
Yeah. Went through many complications based on that. And you could put all these elements together and try to create a composite of what made him what he is, but essentially, we never know what creates a Richard Ramirez and what comes from them. Another reason why I'm doing this is because the parallel between him and I. He was born let me tell you, he was born a year after me in El Paso, Texas. I was born in Juarez, which is about a couple of miles over the bridge. But I then grew up, my parents had a business in El Paso, and so I lived there and I grew up, maybe, I don't know, might have been side by side in the strange places with him. Could have been. I moved to LA, and then after that, I spent the rest of my life here from when I was like 3 years old. But when he came, when I was here in LA, my dad had a dry cleaning business. And we would make the rounds of picking up clothes from, there was a couple of places called West Coast, Pawn Shop, and B3. They are just a few feet north of 5th and Main. And during the 80s, during the mid-80s, I spent a lot of time working with Dad coming to do that, and he would go in and work out the business with these guys. And so I'd spend a lot of time walking around the blocks there in the Skid Row, getting to know it. And that's another case where who knows? I might have walked right past him. I was right in that area. Also the Greyhound bus station, which we're going to visit. Greyhound bus station is very important. It is the hub of his operation. He needed to be there. That's the point to which he arrived in LA. And once he got here and he established himself, and he would stay in flop houses. He never had like a permanent apartment or anything. He needed to be nearby the Greyhound bus station within running distance at all times. Because when things got hot, when the cops were around or anything, he could go and hop a bus and immediately be either in Tucson or El Paso or San Francisco or anywhere else he had to go. He had relatives in different towns. He also had a brother who lived in East Los Angeles, so he had places that he could go. He was a survivor. As I say, he was a predator. He knew what he wanted to do, and he found the means to do it. And spent a lot of time without getting caught. It was really, really good. It was really a tough act. I can't tell you what would have happened if he wasn't caught. Did someone have a question? Yeah. A clinical drug addict, I would say, I don't think an examination was ever done to determine that if he was clinically addicted to drugs, but he loved drugs. That was part of his survival. As far as anything, as far as his physical self, he never ate normal food. He ate just crap. He liked sodas. He didn't really dig on alcohol. He would go to some bars for other things. As far as drugs, he loved coke. He loved coke and crack, and he did speed. He smoked pot. You could say, yeah, this guy's a druggie. I would say, yeah, he's a druggie. As far as like an addict where clinically, like you have withdrawals and you got to give him detox and all that, I don't think so. He could handle it, but he was one of these guys that was remarkable in the sense that there's certain people who treat their bodies like garbage. I mean, I'm sure we've all know or heard of someone like that. They just put crap into themselves, right? They don't do the thing, they don't sleep, everything, and yet they're healthy as a horse. This guy, speaking to Sheriff Detective Guerrero, this guy was like an athlete. You saw him, if you see him, this guy was powerful, this guy was strong. He was just built to be like a panther, like a predator, and God help us all, man, when this guy was loose, seriously. Because it's inconceivable to me how he didn't kill himself, but yet he was able to overpower people, to just survive and thrive and live in these conditions that he did for as long as he did. And it's just a unique, freakish guy that's really scary when you start analyzing him. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
I got a question. Do you have any kids?
No, do not have any kids. Yes, sir. His parents. The gentleman asked what part did his parents play. I can tell you that his mom was a very traditional, very normalish. I have an image of her, but she's a very normalish lady, just like anybody else's mom that would have, who was just anguished about this whole thing. And as much in denial of it, even through the trial, as a mother could be. She was tormented. It tore her apart. He had brothers. He had a girlfriend in El Paso who believed in him. Now his father was a whole another can of worms. His dad had this personality. Perhaps some of us can relate to it. When he had temper tantrums, he was a cool guy. He was nice, but he had these episodes where if something really pissed him off, out of nowhere, he was in the kitchen and the can opener was not working, he was the kind of guy who would stand up and go over to the wall and start beating his head on it till he had blood and cuts on his own head, because physical, inanimate objects that were not complying with his will would infuriate him. He would lose control. It got to the point where nobody in the house wanted to be in the house when he was home. As soon as he was there, everybody made an excuse. I gotta go, I gotta run, I'm gonna be at the neighbors, whatever. That's another reason Richard never spent time at home himself, and his brothers felt the same way, and his wife had to put up with it to an extent. It was a really a really difficult and really horrible situation. And yeah, it's sad and it's tragic in that regard. And unfortunately, now his family has to live with the infamy of being related to this guy and all that. And there's a constant struggle to regain some sort of privacy, but it's gone forever, you know. And so that's that. Yes.
Speaking of family having to live with the legacy, what happened to the uncle?
Well, I'll tell you something interesting about the uncle. At one of the sessions when Richard and the uncle were sitting talking over this stuff, the uncle's wife, lady, was starting to get kind of fed up. The uncle was a bit of a no good. And she wanted him to find a job. Go do something productive. Now, I mean, yeah, he's a veteran. He's getting his pension and all that, but she'd like him to be productive, to kind of do something with his life. And sitting there telling Richard these stories was just getting to her nerves. She was nagging him a lot. She would nag him, and we finally got to a point one evening. Richard was over. His wife comes home from work. You know, she's tired. She's got groceries. She's got stuff. She puts it down. She's like, you know what, Mike? Why don't you blah blah blah, right? Mike gets up, goes over to the closet, brings out his handgun, and goes over and shoots his wife in the face. Richard is sitting about this distance and gets splattered. At that point, obviously, his uncle was arrested and went to jail for murder. But that is another moment that we can add to the recipe of what made up Richard Ramirez.
Did Richard testify against his uncle?
Sorry?
Did Richard testify against his uncle?
No,
He wouldn't
Richard
do it?
did not. He was told to his uncle told him, get out of here, you didn't see a damn thing, and you're never to come back here.
At what point did this happen? And so Richard Ramirez witnesses his uncle shoot his aunt point blank in the face.
Yes.
How old was he, and how many years passed till he began his own killing spree?
He was 13.
Wow.
He then continued his life of sort of
Petty larceny.
petty larceny. At that point, his family would try to get him into something that any sense of a decent occupation. They got him a job at one of the hotels in El Paso as kind of like a helping clean out, you know, the rooms and things like that nature. Unfortunately, he took advantage of that position to burglarize the guests' rooms, and then proceeded to be involved in an episode where he started peeping in on guests, on the women. Went and attacked one of them actually in the room one time when he hid in there, waited for her to come back. Her husband came in, proceeded to beat the crap out of him, and he flew out the window, and that was the end of that gig. At that point, it was just advised to him, you know, why don't you go visit your relatives in San Francisco or California? You know, why don't you see what you can do with your life? And he didn't need any more invitation. You know, he was, in that sense, independent, where he didn't want to conform to things. And what happened when he arrived in Los Angeles, I'm really liking just going on and on, if you guys don't know.
Great.
One thing that happened when he came to Los Angeles, which is why he took to this place so much, and why it became his new home. Back in El Paso, you know, his career was to be to do the capers, to rob, and to, you know, break in and do things like steal things. When he ran out of places to do so in El Paso, which is a smallish town, and he came to LA for the first time, he was like, oh, wow. He got off the Greyhound bus. He starts looking around, traveling around, you know, taking the bus, whatever, getting around. He's realizing that Los Angeles has communities like Beverly Hills, Bel Air, really affluent places in the San Gabriel Valley and the South and things like that. He says, back in Texas, you don't have that sort of delineation where you have this, you know, the suburbs and then you have the rich. It's not really that exists. What he saw here, what he saw was a gold mine, a virtual gold mine, because the sprawling design that is Los Angeles was to his benefit and to his advantage. In terms of, he can go to Beverly Hills or Santa Monica and commit a crime, and within minutes, he can be 20, 30, 40 miles away back into some flop house hotel in Skid Row, and nobody can trace him back. He just sits there, made it out clean. Now, no threat of someone following him. He can lose himself and blend himself, and that was the beauty of being also in Skid Row, that he realized it's a place where if you want to be lost and you want to disappear, this is the place where you were able to do it.
Al, I think I want you to wrap it up because it's getting close to time for you to start check people in, and I know you want to leave by 2:15. So maybe if we could just have a show of hands of how many people. So Richard Ramirez first came to Los Angeles at the Greyhound station and basically walked down Main Street. Yes. How many people in the room have also had that experience as their first trip to Los Angeles? I guess Ian left. Okay. All right. So why don't you just wrap it up? I'm going to walk Ruthann back, but I think you should start checking people in because I want to leave on time.
Okay, I'm going to start talking about what we're going to be doing at this point in terms of the check-in and the registration. A lot of you people here, I welcome everybody. I'm really happy that you're here. What we're going to do is I have a register here, and I'm going to take the people that have reservations and take them down. You can purchase the tickets. I realize that there's more people who may want to be on this tour today. With all my heart, I wish I could comply and take everyone that wanted to. It's physically impossible because of the nature of the walking tour. It just becomes so out of control and so difficult for everyone to listen and to get what I want people to get out of this tour that you'll understand. I'll give it my best try. We'll see. Last year we had a certain amount of people and it worked, so you'll understand why it is if I set any limitations at this point. But I have a table set up over here.
Are there going to be tours in the future if people can't do this one?
Yeah, I definitely believe to be doing this on an annual basis. I'm really working to add a second tour of this during the year, hopefully in the fall, because I want to do it at night because it's going to add a whole other dimension to the entire proceeding, and it'll be fascinating.
Have you ever mentioned to do a crime scene tour where the murders actually took place?
There's a couple of reasons why I will not do the crime scene tours. One is out of respect for the victims, because I don't want to. I just don't want to go there. I don't want to take. I feel that doing that aspect of it is, I personally feel, is exploitative. It may not be in someone else's interpretation, but I feel that way, so I'll feel crappy if I do it. The other reason is because I got to tell you, essentially, looking at some stucco beige apartment building is not interesting. I mean, I could take you there, but it's not going to be all that. And they're so spread apart that logistically it would be really difficult and time-consuming. You'd spend all day going to all these spots, and at the end of the day, you're like, well, I just saw some empty buildings. And, so that's how I feel about it. People have asked me if I could do that. I'm sure you can look up I have all the addresses if you wanted to, but some places have changed, or they're not the same. The people don't live there anymore, so, Also, in terms of feedback, I wanted to give you a couple of important details. I got a letter from Jenny Carnes. Her brother was one of the victims of Richard Ramirez. She states in her letter, "Thank you, Al, for doing this tour. God bless you. It means a lot. I believe in what you're doing, and thank you." I thought that meant a lot, because she understands what we're trying to do. We're trying to understand this guy. We're not here to take you on a rock star tour, with Richard Ramirez. It's not so much about that, but more about just encompassing the reality of what happened, the history of it. It's a story part of LA, and I'm more than happy and proud to present it. And I'm also have been very happy and proud to have been part of Kim and Richard's Los Salon here today. I hope to continue to have you guys or any other people who are interested in the long run. I have a mailing list here. Please sign up, because there's going to be a lot of fun, interesting stuff that I'm going to be doing in the future from now on. So it'll be a lot of fun to have you guys included. Thanks, and what I want to do at this time is you guys come up and we'll start registering and get rolling. And we'll get rolling on this thing, and we're going to have a lot of fun, really interesting. It'll be a unique thing, and you guys will never forget. Thank you very much. Oh, it's been